Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, and nice to see everyone. As astonishing as it's been, the rise of social in all the ways that we are studying and enjoying marketing, advertising, public relations, disasters, and recovery, I've always thought that the quiet promise of social in the enterprise was really about the transformation of business, and the rise of the empowered employee and talent management and identification of not just good ideas, but tremendously talented people. So to talk about all of that with me, I've got Jason Breed, who runs the social practice at Accenture, and Maria Poveromo, with a similar role at Adobe. I've been practicing her name backstage. So
You did great.
Thank you so much. So Jason, let's start with you. We don't have a lot of time. And in our prep for this conference, we talked a little bit about transformation and from your 10,000-mile view, how it's all changing in the world. And you had identified for me something that was quite interesting, which was the idea of the specialist no longer being the number one talent driver or the number one idea driver within an organization. Can you talk a little bit generally about what you've seen and then go anywhere you'd like to go?
Yeah, sure. So, it's interesting as we see, I have an opportunity to see a lot of different companies and a lot of different makeups and how people are going through this transformation right now. And one of the things that's interesting is now we are able to manage and monitor and analyze things in very different ways. And so what we see is this kind of emergence in redefining the value of an employee. And so if you start to think about, traditionally we've hired people for their specialties, and if you start to look then at how business actually gets done, a lot of what's happening is it's the people who connect the different silos within the organization together. And now with social capabilities, social technologies, you're able to actually measure and enable or empower those people to start to connect those things. So it's almost like this redefining so who's the most valuable, right? I'm not saying that your experts are not valuable, but there's this emergent culture that is becoming as valuable or possibly more valuable in the future.
So before we dig into the nuts and bolts of what you're measuring and how you're doing that, both internally and with your clients, Maria, I thought we could talk a little bit about an interesting twist to what you do. I mean, your background and your passion in marketing and PR and communications, but in fact, your social team within Adobe has become a case study for how to scale social within an enterprise.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Jason about the role of the specialists versus the connectors. Back in 2009, Adobe had a few champions who were very active and prolific in social media, celebrity status almost. But it wasn't that they were very coordinated necessarily or the most strategic. And so we came in as a team, my team sort of led a more holistic strategy, and we built out a framework and everybody aligned around that. And it's been great because we've been able to galvanize among our 10,000 employee base. We have about 2,000 actively engaged. There's about 80 who are leads on social media, and then there's a core team that's actually driving the key strategies. So it's well coordinated, but that's not to disempower employees to engage. But what I did see is that as we were building out this framework that has provided a lot of benefit to the business, which we'll talk about, I did hit some resistance. There were people and teams who were very fearful. Oh, you're coming in with policies and guidelines. It means I can't tweet the way I want to, and I can't blog whatever I want to say. And no. It's all about protecting the brand. Yes, that's true, and having a holistic strategy and delivering some key themes. But in the end, we empower employees to basically be passionate and express their point of view without causing trouble to the brand. But definitely, I think it has been an educational process. I think it's a long road for brands. I think it's a lot of work. And I think one thing I learned is that you expect people just to get on board within a week or two or a month once you highlight, here's the benefit to customers, here's the business benefit. And you think people will get on board. But in fact, it takes a long time to institute change, to change ideologies, philosophies, to get people comfortable. I know a lot of the speakers here were talking about fear of stepping out. Charlene mentioned the first time she blogged. Exactly, the first time you tweet is terrifying. So encountering all of that sort of fear of territoriality, of losing control, of putting oneself out there, we definitely had to undo. We had to work through, and I feel like we're in a really good place. We're not perfect, but I think we're in a really good place.
So how big is your team? Just to give us some context.
So we're about 14 dedicated social strategies. I oversee analyst relations and public relations as well, but social media has 4 dedicated strategists, but 80 social leads globally. That means people who are doing social media 30, 50, 60% of their time, but they also have another job function. And then we have 2,000 employees who are empowered to tweet and speak on our behalf because they've gone through the certification and trainings.
Wow. So Jason, I know that you've got a really big practice, and you not only have a role internally, you have tremendous insights of what's happening with your client companies. What has been the big challenges around linking social, which is something that we all think that we know what it is and how to do, to real business impacts? What does that look like? What are you measuring? What does that really even mean?
Yeah, so early on as companies start to dip their toe in the water, right, and you grab the person with a Twitter account and they become your social person, and so it was all about the conversation. So you had what I refer to as these conversation evangelists, and it really gave rise from this bottom up type of approach within the enterprise. And now as companies start to see value and as more impact from customers driving through the enterprise for the first time really ever, and as marketers starting to take control of more of the technology and all these different things converging, what we see is this movement from the conversation into how to solve actual business problems. And so what we're seeing is that the companies that are looking to transition now are looking at business objectives and then looking at how they can take social and best apply some of the capabilities and technologies to solve some even more vexing type of problems. So you look at everything from the branding and the HR and advocacy and reach and those things, but all the way, and we'll call that the front office, and then you look all the way down the value chain of an enterprise in product and product innovation and product research, and you look down at supply chain, for instance, and you look down even to HR and how people are bringing employees on. And so really across the entire value chain of a company, you can start to tie these business applications into social and start to drive real transformation, real change.
Right. What have you discovered?
So I'm going to geek out for just a minute, and please forgive me. But the whole theme of this conference is social business, right? So we established a measurement framework, and I'd be happy to share it with anyone who tweet me or whatever, contact me, where we basically identified the key business objectives, much to what Jason is saying, but it's not just PR and communications where I happily live. We oversee everything, whether it's HR and recruiting, support, or product development and engineering. We've identified business objectives. We've identified 4 to 5 KPIs, key performance indicators, to ladder up to that. And we say to the whole company, you can choose among these, but please keep within these. The reason for that is we're trying to offer some flexibility, but also be able to roll up our data and our reports in a holistic fashion. And it's actually worked really well. We did a roadshow, we shared it with all the teams. It's very well socialized, people are using these KPIs. It also helps that we have a platform called Adobe Social, and I think there's a booth out there that helps to kind of keep everything on a common platform. So we're measuring everything, we're tracking as much as we can, and the previous speaker said it really well about the importance of data informing strategy and creative marketing. But anyway, I don't want to mean to geek out, but it is a ton of work. It took about 6 months to identify what are people measuring today. Oh, those are the wrong things or the right things. It turns out 80% were right. They laddered up to business objectives, but nobody really formalized it. So we basically formalized and said, hey, please, moving forward, use these. And now we can standardize reports. We can report to our execs. And through this whole process, we've been able to prove ROI, the 10-fold ROI at our last launch. We've been able to prove the value of brand advocacy and shifts in perception through social media. So it's very powerful, but it does deliver business results.
So my piece of geekery in all of this, which you've been very indulgent with me as we prepped for the conference, is about the talent part of it. I was ignited by the book Moneyball in 2006, and I've been asking this question of people like you and others and CEOs ever since, is there ever going to be a network, a framework where we can identify real talent, not just the person who's going to look good on the baseball card, but the lumpy person like myself who can actually get on base and start winning games. And not just the people who went to the same school as the CEO or golf or take the cigarette break at the right time, but through this framework that you're building, and you're laughing and you're nodding, so it's not just an issue for you as people who are developing teams, but it's an issue for your clients. Who can you find, what type of employee is going to be thriving in this kind of environment? And what new competencies are you seeing come to the forefront that people can be working on to develop themselves? Do you want to start?
Yeah, I just relate it back to we've been operating for the last 60 years under this imposed structure of how things are organized, right? And you've got the managers who report to the directors, and the directors who report to the VPs, and on up to the CEO, and then you start to look around and to your coworkers and say, how do I get this travel expense approved, or how do I do this function over here, and it's all based on your basically informal network of how you actually get stuff done. And the people with a broader network actually are more productive. And so what you see is this water cooler culture, right? And we'll refer to it as this emergent culture. Now, for the first time, we're able to enable through social capabilities, through social collaboration, through things that we're actually able to capture for the first time this water cooler culture of how things actually get done. So, going to get coffee, and then you find out that, Susie and Joe in the department next to you are doing the same thing that you worked on 3 weeks ago. Now you're able to bring that together in a lot more cohesive fashion. So, companies are at a point, the world is smaller, products are not, when you go to market, you don't have 18 months, you've got 3 weeks, and typically, even before the iPhone 5 gets launched, there's a competitor somewhere in the world that's already launched with something similar, right? So you just don't have the time to work in silos anymore. And so the asset now is the people who can start to pull these things together and tie those silos, those former silos together through this emergent culture.
Are you seeing a new type of leader emerging? Can this something that be taught or developed?
Taught, developed, yes, definitely. I think it comes back to emotional intelligence, this phenomena talked about for a long, long time, but we're finally actually seeing it prove out in that, just as Jason said, no longer do you look for that expert who can write this thing perfectly or deliver that spec or code this brilliantly. Maybe for engineers, they're still kind of contained, so maybe it still holds true for them. But everywhere else, it's really about people being able to reach across that aisle, the proverbial aisle, work with other teams and get people on board to move the whole business forward. So I'm seeing the emergence of skills that aren't necessarily deep, and as Jason mentioned, very, very vertical, but that you can that allow you to build cross-functional teams that are collaborative in nature. And it really is about emotional intelligence. It's about being able to work with people, to respect other people, different points of view, and not necessarily deliver the best finished piece of paper that in the past would have allowed people to get promoted through the ranks.
It's got to be a way coming in the future where measuring the impact of empathy in the workplace, for example, it's got to be something that can be measured. We're seeing it even in medicine. The difference between a cardiac surgeon who is excellent and the outcomes of the patients with a cardiac surgeon who actually connects with his patients or her patients afterwards with empathy and caring. We're starting to be able to measure this. Is that been your experience in the corporate world as well, and are you optimistic about that?
Yes, I definitely think in terms of support, how can you help a customer solve their problem if you can't put yourself in their place? And I think the empathy ability is critical, but not just with customers, and that is incredibly important, but with your peers. If they're feeling threatened or they're feeling challenged, if you put yourself in their place and you understand why, you can eliminate the threat and then remove the barriers and you can proceed forward. Yeah. There's a lot of churn. We know that we all live through corporate politics and we struggle with that. But by putting yourself in someone else's shoes, you can eliminate those barriers. And so empathy is critical. And I think that feeds into emotional IQ.
Jason, you've built a huge practice inside of Accenture. Could you just walk us through a little bit of the growth and what you've done and what you've learned from it?
Sure. So, Accenture is this little 270,000 person workforce globally, and you know, we have been traditionally on the IT side. There's a transformation happening though with a group called Accenture Interactive, and you know, we've had great results. We reported a couple weeks ago, and one of the fastest growing parts of that is the digital side, of which I roll into, of Accenture Interactive. And so as we continue to push forward with this group and looking across the entire company, so social becomes a very important part of this in enabling across the entire enterprise. Sorry. And so we've been able to build out, we started with a community of practice first, and just taking an assessment of all the people who have done work in the social space before. We have about 1,200, 1,300 people or so in our community of practice that share on a daily basis all the work that's going on.
What a resource.
We have,
oh my God, you're like a country.
We have, you know, a number of folks that are trained on different applications and technologies that are available in the market. We have about 150 people who are trained in strategy and follow a consistent framework globally and how we deliver to our clients. So, you know, it's really key to take some of these learnings and continue forward. So we do a lot of collaborative work internally, and it's a very decentralized organization. So you know, there's benefits and challenges of that, and really social is enabling all of Accenture to grow and do better as well.
Maria, I'm going to give you the last word because you had such an interesting take on how you learn, because you are in a much different place in terms of the size and scope of your organization. And I think it speaks to the promise of social. So take us home with how you learn.
The way I stay on top of sort of social developments is really through Twitter, alerts, but most definitely peers and social media, attending conferences like this, talking to other people who are in the trenches and working. There is such a level of transparency among social practitioners, unlike I've ever seen in any other function. And maybe it'll continue, I hope it will, but eventually as we prove value, I think our corporate natures will shut that down, consider it IP, and stop us from sharing. I hope that doesn't happen. I really do hope that we continue the transparency and working together, but I rely so heavily, on my peer of social practitioners. You know, how are you doing with this? How are you getting over this challenge? Who is the best vendor for this thing? It really has been invaluable, and I love that. I think it's the spirit of social media. I think it's the nature of the beast to want to share. I hope we can maintain that and continue that through.
Well, that sounds like a Fast Company article to me.
Yes.
Fast company.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how we learn.
Thanks. Thanks so much, guys. And thank you so much. We're out of time.